Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a bit of an anthropological tour of a really fascinating and, let's be honest, sometimes completely baffling foreign land, the university campus. But we're not here to look at the architecture. We're looking at the people. Specifically, we're exploring the unique academic tribes that inhabit this space. Today's focus is entirely on a concept called discourse communities. It's a real game changer. It completely shifts how we understand academic fields, their shared goals, their hidden norms, and exactly how they expect you to communicate. So, picture this. Have you ever stared at a blank screen, trying to bang out an essay or a research report, and just felt like you were putting on a mask? Like you were trying to sound like someone you're completely not, and honestly feeling a little bit like an imposter in the whole process? Well, if you have, you are absolutely not alone. This awkward, mask-wearing feeling isn't a sign that you're a bad writer. It's actually a symptom of culture shock. You see, academic writing isn't just about memorizing grammar rules. It's about adopting a very specific, highly specialized identity. Okay, let's dive into this. The source material we're looking at today puts this, well, pretty bluntly. It notes that in the academic world, failing to display an identity fully is tantamount to announcing you do not have that identity. At best, you are a pretender or a beginner. Ouch, right? It's a harsh realization, but it explains so much. Academic success actually means presenting yourself in a way that is highly valued by a specific discipline. It literally means adopting their values, their beliefs, and their specific way of speaking and writing. Because if you don't sound like a member of the tribe, the gatekeepers of that tribe simply won't let you in. Which brings us to Section 1, defining discourse communities. So how do we figure out what these gatekeepers actually want? The absolutely crucial point here is understanding that a discourse community is a group of people who share texts, practices, common goals, and a specialized vocabulary to construct knowledge. We really can't just look at academic disciplines, things like history, biology, or economics, as just, subjects you study for an exam. We have to look at them as distinct cultures. They are literal ways of being in the world. They have their own deep traditions, their own strict criteria for what makes a valid argument, and completely unique ways of making sense of the human experience. To really break this down, we can look at the characteristics outlined by linguist John Swales. He argues that these communities function exactly like tribes. First off, they have collective goals and purposes, meaning they're all trying to solve similar problems. Second, they have a shared, highly specialized terminology. Think of it like a secret handshake. If you know the jargon, you're in the club. Third, they use very specific genres of communication to talk to each other. And finally, there's a strict hierarchy. You've got the experts at the top dictating the rules, and the novices at the bottom just trying to learn the ropes. Now, you might be wondering, why do these tribal rules matter so much? Well, it comes down to this really interesting concept called social constructivism. As the philosopher Richard Rorty famously noted, knowledge is the social justification of belief. Think about that for a second. Knowledge isn't just some objective, fixed truth floating out in the universe waiting for us to discover it. It's actually created and constructed by these communities. What counts as a fact, what makes an effective argument, or what is considered adequate evidence depends entirely on the tribal community you're acting within. They literally build their reality through their shared language. Moving right along to Section 2, the power of genres. This brings us to the specific tools these tribes use to communicate, build knowledge, and maintain their unique cultures. Now, when you hear the word genre, you probably just think of boring formatting rules, or maybe whether a movie on Netflix is a comedy or a thriller. But in a discourse community, genres are the whole shebang. Swales describes them as the recurrent classes of communicative events that orchestrate verbal life. They aren't just empty templates. They are social actions. They balance tradition with innovation. Ultimately, they are the actual rituals that hold the community together and allow its members to get things done. And this brilliantly illustrates the vast array of rituals you actually have to master to become a recognized member of any discipline. We usually just focus on the written genres on the left, right? The research articles, those daunting grant proposals, dissertations, and your standard undergraduate essays. But there's this entire ecosystem of spoken genres on the right, too. Things like lectures, tutorial sessions, peer feedback, and yes, the terrifying dissertation defense. Each of these is a distinct communicative act, and each one is heavily, heavily regulated by the community's expectations. Okay, up next is Section 3, the continuum of knowledge. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is seeing that these rules aren't uniform across the entire university. If you walk out of the chemistry lab and stroll over to the literature department, you are crossing a massive cultural border. Academic writing is absolutely not a single monolithic thing. It exists on this giant sliding scale.
On one far end, we have the hard sciences, physics, geology, chemistry. On the far other end, we have the softer humanities, English, history, classics. And smack in the middle, we have the social sciences. As you move along this line, the very nature of how knowledge is built and how you're expected to communicate it completely transforms.
I mean, just look at the stark differences across this cultural divide. In the hard sciences, the goal is empirical, cumulative knowledge, so the writing naturally suppresses human agency. It's impersonal, it's emotionally neutral, and it relies really heavily on the passive voice to highlight the experiment itself, not the scientist doing it. But jump over to the soft humanities, and it's the exact opposite. Knowledge over there relies on introspection and explicit interpretation. So scholars use tons of first-person pronouns. They say, I argue, and in my view. The writing is discursive, fluid, and relies on the sheer strength of the scholar's individual argument. What is brilliant writing in one tribe is a terrible failure in another. Finally, we reach section 4, becoming an insider. So, if the university is just packed full of these distinct, highly regulated tribes, how on earth do you survive? How do you go from being an outsider looking in to an accepted, respected member of the community? Well, let's move to and see how this builds into what researchers call a cognitive apprenticeship. It's essentially a gradually mentored pathway. You start at step 1 as a peripheral novice. Think of an undergrad who is just kind of visiting the discipline. Then, in step 2, through your lectures, writing essays, and getting feedback, you undergo a socialization of practices. You start internalizing the norms, the vocabulary, the genres. And finally, if you stick with it, you reach step 3, full induction and expertise. You don't just know the rules anymore, you literally embody the identity of the discipline. But hey, we absolutely have to acknowledge that this process can be incredibly stressful. Discourse communities are not monolithic, and you aren't just a blank slate. As the research points out, many students, especially multilingual students, experience immense pressure shuttling between their home identities, their everyday literacies, and the super rigid academic identities demanded by the university. It's like you're constantly negotiating who you are depending on which tribe's territory you happen to be standing in at any given moment. Let's leave you with a final thought to carry with you today. Take a look at your own life. Which discourse communities are you already a member of? Is it your workplace, maybe a gaming group, a specific academic major, or even just your family? And more importantly, how do the invisible rules, the specialized jargon, and the shared goals of those tribes shape the you that you present to the world? Once you start seeing the world through this lens of discourse communities, you'll realize you've been a multilingual shapeshifter this entire time. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the rules of your tribes.